Hey guys, Kiki here for another video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about patterns, and not just patterns, but specifically how to transfer your own patterns, or maybe even patterns you bought at the store, and transfer them onto the computer to make sure that they're scaled correctly. If you just simply take a picture of your pattern and you bring it onto the computer, it might not be the accurate size. So this tutorial I hope will guide you and to making all your patterns digital, which can have a lot of advantages. Personally, for me, I like to make vectors of my patterns, and then I like to use them to either laser cut or print stuff out. So if this is something that you feel like you need to do, please stick around and let's get started. So before getting into it, some things that I will be using for this tutorial is a cutting mat that has ruler and grid lines that are the length or size of my pattern, as well as a phone with leveling capabilities, which helps when you take the picture to try to make sure that your photo is less distorted. And I'll be using Photoshop and Vectric. Photoshop will help me crop my photo and make sure it's even, and I'll simply be using Vectric to make my grid to make sure it's scaled appropriately. There's other softwares and programs you can use, so it might be worth watching the video just to get the idea of how to do it, and then do it in the program that you prefer. Since I work in Vectric, this is the program I'm going to be using. The same goes for Photoshop. I'm just going to be rotating the image to be more even and slightly cropping it. You don't necessarily need Photoshop to do this. So let's get started. And as you can see, I've been slowly kind of working on my pattern here, and these patterns are for my armor pieces, so I'm scaling them on my body. So that's kind of why I want them in real life, so I can make sure that they're going to work for my body. And once I have them all kind of done, I'd like to transfer them onto a solid piece of paper, and I have designs that I'm going to be drawing on them. And I like to just make them really, really bold and sharpy because I'm going to be making all these into vectors, and it's just going to be easier for me to see my pattern overall. So going all the way down the arm, I have all my little pieces here, which will be cut out, and it just helps keep it in order for me to be organized in this way so that I know which piece is for what. So if you have a store-bought pattern or just your regular paper pattern and it may have got wrinkled up, you can just iron it on heat and don't do any steam just to flatten it out, because the piece being flat is really important. So if you have any creases or anything, just try to get them out to make it as flat as possible to have more accurate results. So now we're going to take the piece and just try to put it anywhere on the grid. It doesn't exactly have to be in the corner like I have it here. Just make sure that you can see the ruler, and wherever you placed your pattern, that you're using the grid to make it even. I'm going to be working on the centimeter side because it's just going to be easier for what I'm doing rather than the inches side. So now that everything's flat, I have everything taped down and it looks pretty good and it's flat, you can go ahead and take an above photo. I'm going to be using my Galaxy 20 phone, which has a leveling capability. A lot of phones have this. I recommend enabling it and using it so that you make sure your above shot is pretty even. So here's my shot here, and it looks pretty good and pretty even. However, I am going to have to make a little bit of adjustments on the cropping and orientation. So let's go ahead and bring this right into Photoshop. So I'm going to click and drag some guidelines so I can see what's straight and compare that to the lines on my mat. And as you can see, it isn't quite even. So I'm going to add a horizontal line and a vertical line to kind of match up my picture here, and then just rotate it. All right, you can use Command A for selecting everything, and then Command T, and just you'll get the little rotate icon, and then you can just kind of shift it, and you might have to play around with it a little bit and get it as even as possible so you know your orientation is straight. Alright, after we feel like the image is straight, I'm just going to crop it in and make sure not to crop your ruler out because we will need that for the next step. So once it's done, you're just going to save your file. I'm going to save mine as a JPEG just because that's what I need to transport it, but feel free to save it as you want. Okay, so I'm going to be working in Vectric V-Carve. It's the program that I'm using. So I'm going to create a new file, and like I said, you might be able to do this in a lot of other programs since they're kind of set up the same. So I'm working in millimeters now, and I'm just going to set up the millimeters I need for my workspace for my pattern size, and just go ahead and start my file. So I brought in my edited image that we cropped that's lined up, and I'm just going to line it up in the corner over here where my 0 point is. And I like to first add in a vertical and horizontal line, just pulling from the top and the bottom, just to find my 0 point. And then the corner of my ruler is where it's going to line up to be at 0. So after I get that lined up right here, just about, I'm just going to move forward. So since the ruler is in centimeters and I'm working in millimeters, 1 centimeter is equal to 10 millimeters, so I need to keep that in mind when laying out my lines. So I decided to lay out my lines to every 50, so I'm going to put one at 50, and then I'm going to put one at 100, and then I'm going to put one at 150, and so on. So we're just going to be creating a grid so that we can match the mat centimeters to our millimeters that we're going to be working in the program. So it's going to be scaled to the correct size. And like I said, you can do this in many programs. So I wasn't too worried that I was going to be using Vectric. I know a lot of people don't really have a reason or going to be using Vectric, but the process is pretty similar. And I'm going to be doing the same thing going down vertically as well. All right, so I have my grid pretty much made. I don't need it to go all the way across, just the majority. And I'm going to be scaling it up. So I'm going to be matching the centimeters on the mat to the millimeters on my grid. So the 5 would be 50, the 10 would be 100, and so forth. And it just takes a little playing around with until I get it even. Depending on what you decided to use on your ruler and what your program uses, your conversions may be different. But basically, this is just what I do, and this is how I scale my patterns. So after it's blown up evenly, there's a lot of different things you can do as far as tracing your pattern. There's different websites that will just trace your pattern and turn it into vectors if you want vectors. This program has a tracing option. I prefer to just do them on my own. So that pretty much sums up my video of how I like to turn my patterns digital onto the computer. I really hope this was helpful for somebody or anybody, at least led them in the right direction. If there's any other videos that you would like me to do or recommendations or more things you want me to elaborate on, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. And I want to give a huge thank you to all my Twitch supporters this month. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me in my streams and supporting the stream and just being there. I really appreciate it. I know I haven't been on as much as I would like to. I hope to have a lot of foam videos coming up next if anyone is interested. I already started working on my new videos, which are going to be about foam, and I started my recent video, which is going to be about foam clay. So if this is something that may be interesting to you, feel free to hit the subscription button, as well as I do have a lot of videos on resin printing already, and my collection keeps growing. So again, thank you everyone for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it.